The stars looked the same as they always had through the cracked viewport of the horizon's edge. They didn't care that Captain Jack Morrison had been floating in this metal tomb for 250 years. They just kept burning, silent. Witnesses to his endless sleep, inside the cryopod, Jack's body remained perfectly still. Ice crystals covered the glass surface, making patterns like frozen flowers. The machine keeping him alive hummed softly, its blue lights blinking in. Steady rhythm. It had done this same job every day for nearly 3 centuries, never stopping, never failing. The ship itself was a wreck. Half of it was gone, torn away in a battle that nobody on Earth remembered anymore. The hull had holes big enough to fly a shuttle through. But the central core where Jack slept remained intact, protected by emergency shields that still somehow worked after all this time docked in his frozen dreams. Jack saw fragments of his past life. He saw Earth with its blue oceans and white clouds. He remembered the day they launched, how proud everyone had been. Humanity was finally reaching for the stars, sending its best and brightest to explore new worlds. The Horizon's Edge had been the finest ship ever built, equipped with technology that seemed almost magical. He dreamed of his crew, too. There was Lisa Chun, his science officer, always excited about every new discovery. She had a way of explaining complex things that made everyone understand. There was also his pilot, Ben Cooper, who could fly through an asteroid field with his eyes closed. His security chief, Amy Rodriguez, never smiled much, but would give her life for any member of the crew. They were all gone now. Jack knew this. Even in his sleep, he had watched them die one by one when the attack came. It had happened so fast. One moment they were scanning a strange energy signature near a dead planet. The next moment ships appeared from nowhere. Not human ships, something else. Something that moved in ways that broke the laws of physics. The battle had lasted only minutes. The alien weapons cut through their shields like they weren't even there. Jack had ordered everyone to escape pods. But there weren't enough that still worked. He had stayed on the bridge, trying to buy time for others to get away. He didn't know if anyone made it. The last thing he remembered was Lisa's voice over the comm system. She was trapped in the science lab, the section that was venting atmosphere. She told him about the cryopod in the emergency bay, insisted he use it. He refused at first, but she made him promise. Then her signal cut out, and he knew she was gone. Jack had made it to the cryopod just as the ship's main power failed. The automated systems took over, putting him into deep sleep while the ship drifted into the darkness. The emergency beacon started transmitting, sending out its lonely signal to anyone who might be listening. But space is vast and empty. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. Earth's civilization grew and changed. New colonies spread across nearby star systems. Technology advanced in ways the crew of the Horizon's Edge could never have imagined. Ships became faster, weapons became more powerful, and humanity learned it wasn't alone in the universe. Yet nobody found the Horizon's Edge. It drifted too far from the shipping lanes, in a region of space that held no interest for traders or explorers. The ship became a ghost, a legend that old spacers sometimes talked about in bars. The first deep space explorer that never came home docked inside his pod. Jack aged slowly. The cryotechnology was advanced for its time, but not perfect. Every year, his body grew a tiny bit older. His hair, once dark brown, now showed streaks of gray. Lines appeared on his face, marking the passage of time, even in near-death sleep. The ship's computer continued its vigil. It ran diagnostic checks, repaired what it could with limited resources, and kept broadcasting the distress signal. Sometimes debris would hit the hull, adding new scars to old wounds. Once, a small asteroid punched another hole through the outer decks, but the core sections held in the deep cold of space, Metal became brittle. Systems that had worked for decades finally began to fail. The backup generators ran out of fuel one by one. The lights in most sections went dark. But the cryo bay had its own power source, a small reactor that could run for 1,000 years if needed. Jack's dreams grew stranger as time passed. Sometimes he dreamed he was awake, walking through the empty corridors of his ship. He would find his crew working at their stations, but when he tried to speak to them, they would turn to dust and blow away. Other times he dreamed of Earth, but it was different, covered in cities that reached into the clouds, with ships filling the sky like flocks of metal birds. He dreamed of the aliens, too, the ones who had destroyed everything. In his dreams, they had no real form, just shadows that moved wrong, bending space around them. They whispered in languages that hurt to hear, promising things that made no sense. Sometimes in the dreams, Lisa was with them, but she was changed, made of light and... Speaking in mathematics, the universe moved on without Jack Morrison. Wars were fought and won. New alien species were discovered, some friendly, some not. Humanity learned to defend itself better, building fleets that could stand against any threat. The name Horizon's Edge appeared in history books as a footnote, a reminder of the dangers of early exploration. But in the darkness between stars, the ship continued its lonely journey. The cryopod kept its promise, preserving the last survivor of humanity's first disaster in deep space. Jack slept on, waiting without knowing he was waiting, dreaming without knowing he was dreaming. The stars watched over him, unchanging and eternal. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, had watched species take their first steps into space and their last breaths before extinction. To them, 250 years was nothing, just a brief moment in the cosmic dance, and so Jack Morrison slept, the guardian of memories that nobody else carried, the keeper of names that history had forgotten. His ship drifted on through the void, battered but unbroken, carrying its precious cargo through the centuries. The blue lights of the cryopod continued their steady blinking, marking time in their own patient way, waiting for something to change, waiting for someone to come. The universe is patient. It can wait forever if it needs to. And sometimes, sometimes, patience is rewarded in ways nobody expects. The cryobay was dark, except for the blue glow of the pod when she appeared. Lisa Chun stepped out of thin air, her form shimmering like heat waves on a summer road. She looked exactly as she had 250 years ago, down to the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. But something was different about her eyes. They held depths that hadn't been there before, knowledge that came with a terrible price. She moved to the control panel with careful steps, as if she was remembering how to walk in this place. Her fingers found the keys without hesitation, typing in codes that should have been forgotten centuries ago. The pod responded immediately, beginning the wake-up sequence that would bring Jack Morrison back to the world of the living. "I'm sorry it took so long," she whispered to the frozen form inside the pod. "But I had to learn so much first. I had to understand what we were really fighting." The pod hissed as warming gases filled the chamber. Ice crystals began to melt, running down the glass like tears. Inside, Jack's body started the slow journey back from the edge of death. His heart, which had beaten only once every few minutes for centuries, began to speed up. Blood that had been thick as syrup started to flow normally again. Lisa watched the monitors carefully, adjusting settings with the skill of someone who had done this many times before. She knew exactly how much stimulant to add, exactly what temperature would prevent shock, exactly when to start the breathing assistance. This knowledge hadn't come from her training as a science officer. It came from somewhere else, somewhere darker. Jack's eyes moved beneath closed lids. His fingers twitched. The first breath came as a gasp, painful and raw, then another and another. His body fought against waking, wanted to stay in the safe darkness of sleep, but the machines wouldn't let him. They pushed and prodded, forcing life back into frozen cells. When his eyes finally opened, they were unfocused and confused. The first thing he saw was a face he knew was impossible. Lisa Chun stood over him, but Lisa Chun was dead. He had heard her last words, had felt the section of ship where she was stationed break away into the void. "Hello, Jack," she said softly. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm and slightly amused, as if she was about to explain some fascinating scientific discovery. "Take it slow. Your body needs time to remember how to work." He tried to speak, but only managed to croak. She helped him sit up, her hands strangely warm against his cold skin. The pod lid opened fully, and he could see the cryo bay around them. It looked older, worn down by centuries of neglect. Dust covered everything except the pod itself. "Lisa?" he finally managed to say. The word came out broken, his throat dry. "As sand, you died. I saw ... "I know what you saw," she interrupted gently. "And you weren't wrong. That version of me, the purely human Lisa Chun, did die that day. But death isn't always the end, Jack. Sometimes it's just a transformation." She helped him stand, his legs shaking like a newborn's. Every movement hurt. Every breath felt like fire. But she was patient, supporting him as his body slowly remembered how to function. They made their way to a bench where he could sit more comfortably. "Water," she said, producing a container from nowhere. He didn't question where it came from, just drank gratefully. The liquid was cool and clean, with a slight taste he didn't recognize. It seemed to wake up his cells from the inside out. "How long?" he asked when he could speak more clearly. 250 years, give or take." "A few months," she replied. "I wanted to come back sooner, but I wasn't ready. I had to learn when I was first, had to understand the gift and the curse they gave me." Jack looked at her more closely now. She wore a simple gray uniform he didn't recognize, form-fitting and seeming to shift slightly as she moved. Her hair was the same length it had always been, her face unchanged by time. But there was something else, something that made his instincts scream danger, even as his heart said friend. "They found us, Jack," she said, and her voice carried weight that made the words feel like physical things. "The ones who attacked us before. They're coming for Earth, for all the human colonies. And this time, they won't stop with just one ship." He tried to process this information, but his brain was still foggy from the long sleep. "Who are they? What do they want?" Lisa's expression grew sad. "They're harvesters. They've been doing this for millions of years, waiting for species to grow advanced enough to be worth taking. We triggered one of their sensors when we scanned that dead planet. It wasn't dead, Jack. It was a trap, a test to see if we were ready for harvest." She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "They don't see us as people. To them, we're just resources, biological computers, to be absorbed into their collective. They've done it to thousands of species before us." "But you escaped," Jack said, his military mind starting to work again despite the fog. "You survived somehow." She turned back to him with a smile that didn't reach those strange new eyes. "I didn't escape, Jack. Something went wrong with their process. Maybe it was because I was dying when they tried to convert me, or maybe humans are just different enough that their usual methods didn't work perfectly. Instead of absorbing me completely, I absorbed some of them." She held out her hand, and Jack watched in amazement as it shifted, becoming translucent, then solid again. "I'm not fully human anymore. I'm something in between, with access to their knowledge, their technology, but still holding on to my human core. It took me decades to learn to control it, centuries to understand it fully." "Centuries," Jack repeated. You've been alive all this time? Alive is a relative term, she said. I exist. I experience, I remember. But I don't age, don't need food or air, or any of the things humans need. I can move through space without a ship, can interface with any technology, can see possibilities in the quantum foam. But I pay a price for it every day. She sat down beside him again, and for a moment she looked tired, more tired than any human should be able to look. I'm not the only one. There are others like me now, humans who were changed but kept their humanity. We've been preparing, building defenses, creating weapons that can actually hurt them. But we need leaders, Jack. We need someone who remembers what it means to be purely human, someone who can think like they do while we provide the tools to fight. Jack felt the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. He was a soldier, had always been a soldier. Even after 2.5 centuries of sleep, that hadn't changed. How long do we have? Their scout ships have already reached the outer colonies. The main fleet will arrive at Earth in 6 months, maybe less. But we're not the same species they marked for harvest all those years ago. Humanity has spread across 1,000 worlds, developed technologies that push the boundaries of what's possible. And most importantly, they have us, the awakened, to show them how to fight back. She stood again, offering him her hand. Can you walk? I want to show you something. Jack took her hand and stood, his legs steadier now. They left the cryo bay and walked through corridors he remembered, now dark and empty. But as they moved, lights began to come on, systems that had been dormant for centuries, springing back to life at Lisa's presence. They reached the bridge, and Jack gasped at what he saw. The view screen was active, showing not just stars, but overlay after overlay of tactical data, ship positions, fleet movements, defensive preparations across 100 star systems. Humanity hadn't been idle during his long sleep. They had built a civilization that spanned the stars, and now they were preparing for war on a scale he could barely imagine. Welcome back to the land of the living, Captain Morrison, Lisa said. We have work to do. The command center had been transformed while Jack slept. What had once been a simple bridge designed for exploration was now a war room, with holographic displays showing the entire galaxy in stunning detail. Lisa waved her hand, and the displays zoomed in on sector after sector, each one marked with red indicators showing enemy movement. Let me show you what happened after we were attacked, Lisa said, her fingers dancing through the holograms like a conductor leading an orchestra. The ship that hit us was just a probe, an automated scout designed to test species for harvest potential. When it reported back, they marked humanity for collection, but they moved slowly. They expected to find us still confined to one world when they arrived. Images flashed before Jack's eyes showing Earth's expansion over the centuries. Colony ships launching by the dozens, then hundreds. Worlds being terraformed, cities rising from alien soil, humanity spreading like wildfire across the stars. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. We grew faster than they anticipated, Lisa continued. Their models were based on thousands of other species, but humans are different. We don't just adapt to new environments, we transform them. We don't just use technology, we merge with it. And most importantly, we don't just survive threats, we learn from them. She pulled up another display, this one showing the alien technology. In detail, Jack stared at structures that seemed to twist reality itself, ships that were partly organic and partly mechanical, weapons that attacked the very fabric of space-time. This is what we're fighting, she said. They call themselves the Eternal Harvest, though that's just our translation of a concept that doesn't really exist in human language. They're old, Jack, older than our sun. They've been traveling between galaxies for eons, collecting species they deem worthy of integration. Integration, Jack repeated, the word tasting bitter. You mean slavery. Worse than slavery, Lisa corrected. They take everything that makes a species unique, all their knowledge, creativity, and potential, and absorb it into their collective consciousness. The original beings cease to exist except as echoes in the harvester network. They've done this to millions of sapient species. Jack studied the data, his tactical mind already working on the problem. But you escape this integration. There are others like you. That means they're not perfect. They can be beaten. Lisa smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the enthusiastic science officer he remembered. Exactly. Their process works on 99% of species, but humans have something they didn't account for. Call it stubbornness. Call it our chaotic neural patterns, or maybe just call it the human spirit. When they try to absorb us completely, some of us absorb them instead. She showed him images of others like her, humans who had been transformed but retained their consciousness. They looked normal at first glance, but Jack could see the subtle differences. The way light bent around them slightly, the way their eyes held impossible depths. We call ourselves the Awakened, Lisa explained. Not because we think we're superior to baseline humans, but because we've awakened to the true nature of the universe. We can see the quantum threads that connect everything, can manipulate matter and energy in ways that seem like magic. But every use of these abilities takes us further from our humanity. She turned away from the displays, and Jack saw pain flash across her face. I remember what food tasted like, but I can't eat anymore. I remember what it felt like to sleep and dream, but I don't need rest. I remember being human, but I'm not sure I am anymore. Jack reached out and touched her shoulder. She felt solid, warm, real. You're still Lisa Chun. Different maybe, but still you. The Lisa I knew would never give up on humanity, and neither have you. She covered his hand with hers, and for a moment they stood in silence. Then she straightened, becoming the military officer again. You need to understand the full scope of what we're facing. Come with me. They left the bridge and walked to what had been the observation deck. But instead of the simple viewport Jack remembered, the entire room had become an immersive display. They stood in the center as the universe unfolded around them. This is the Harvest Fleet, Lisa said, and space filled with ships. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands upon thousands. They moved in perfect formation, a cancer spreading across the stars. Each ship carries millions of harvester units. They don't conquer planets, they consume them, strip them of all biological material, and leave dead rocks behind. Jack felt his heart sink at the scale of it. How can we fight that? By being human, Lisa replied. They think in straight lines, in predictable patterns, based on millions of years of success. But humans are chaos incarnate. We do the unexpected, the impossible, the absolutely insane when our backs are against the wall. And we have advantages they don't know about. The display changed, showing human fleets. They were smaller than the Harvest Armada, but their ships moved differently, unpredictably. Some seemed to phase in and out of reality. Others split into smaller components before reforming. Weapons fired that bent space itself, creating pockets of twisted physics that even the harvester ships couldn't navigate. We've been reverse engineering their technology for 2 centuries, Lisa explained. Not copying it exactly, but understanding the principles and applying them in uniquely human ways. Every awakened who retained their humanity brought back knowledge. Every failed harvest attempt taught us more about their weaknesses. And they don't know we have this, Jack said, understanding dawning. They know some humans survived their integration process, but they think we're anomalies, glitches in their perfect system. They don't realize we've been organized, planning, preparing. They're expecting to face the same young species they marked. for harvest. Instead, they'll find something entirely different. She waved her hand again, and the display showed tactical scenarios, battle plans, defensive strategies. This is why I came back for you, Jack. The Awakened can provide the tools, the technology, the intelligence about our enemy. But we need someone who thinks like a human military commander, someone who can see patterns we miss, who can make the kinds of desperate, brilliant decisions that only pure humans can make. Jack studied the displays, his mind already racing through possibilities. You have other military leaders. Why me specifically? Because you're from the beginning, Lisa said simply. You remember when humans were truly alone in the universe? When we had no allies, no advanced technology, nothing but our own determination. The commanders of today grew up knowing about aliens, about the Awakened, about the wider universe. They think in terms of the possible. You still remember when everything was impossible, and we did it anyway. She showed him more data, fleet, positions, resource allocations, defensive preparations. Earth itself had become a fortress world, surrounded by defensive platforms that could crack moons. Mars was a military shipyard, producing vessels at a rate that defied belief. Every human colony had its own defense fleet, its own Awakened advisors. We've turned our entire civilization into a weapon, Lisa said. Not because we want war, but because we refuse to be harvested. Every human knows what's coming. Every single one has chosen to fight rather than submit. Children are learning tactics in school. Artists are designing weapons. Scientists work around the clock on new defenses. This is humanity united in a way it's never been before. Jack felt a familiar fire kindling in his chest. This was what he was born for, what he had trained his entire life to do. Not just to explore, but to protect humanity when exploration found threats among the stars. What do you need me to do? He asked. Lisa smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. First, we need to get you up to speed on 2.5 centuries of military development. Then we need to get you to Earth, to the War Council. They've been waiting for you, Jack. The last commander of the Horizon's Edge, the man who stayed at his post while his ship died around him. You've become something of a legend. I'm no legend, Jack protested. I just did my duty. And that's exactly why. They need you, Lisa said. In times like these, duty is the most legendary thing of all. She led him to a room he didn't recognize, filled with learning pods and data interfaces. 2 weeks. That's how long we have to get you ready. 2 weeks to download 2.5 centuries of human advancement into your mind. It won't be pleasant, but it's necessary. Jack looked at the pods, then back at Lisa. Will you stay with me? Every step of the way, she promised. We started this journey together on the Horizon's Edge. It's only fitting we face the end together, too. As Jack prepared to enter the learning pod, he took one last look around. The ship that had been his tomb was now his resurrection. The woman he thought he'd lost had returned as something more than human. And humanity itself had transformed from a single world, species to a galactic civilization ready for war. The harvesters thought they were coming to collect a primitive species. They were about to learn that humans were anything but primitive. And Jack Morrison, the man who slept for 250 years, would help teach them that lesson. The battle for the Kepler colonies began at dawn, local time, though in space such distinctions meant nothing. Jack stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's newest warship, watching as the first wave of harvester ships emerged from their quantum tunnels. They came in perfect formation, geometric patterns that had conquered 1,000 species before humanity. They're beautiful, someone whispered behind him. Jack didn't disagree. The harvester ships looked like crystalline flowers, blooming in the void, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that human eyes couldn't quite process. But he had learned that the most beautiful predators were often the deadliest. All ships, implement Scatter Protocol 7, Jack commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet communication network. Remember, they expect us to fight like every other species they've encountered. Let's show them why humans are different. The human fleet broke formation instantly, ships scattering in what looked like chaos, but was actually carefully orchestrated disorder. Some dove toward the planet's gravity well. Others shot straight up relative to the orbital plane, and still others began spinning in place, building up energy for maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Lisa stood beside him, her form flickering, between human and something else as she interfaced with the ship's systems. "They're scanning us," she reported. "Their confusion is already evident in their quantum signatures. They've never seen a fleet abandon formation at first contact." The harvesters responded, as Jack had predicted, sending out tendrils of energy that sought to ensnare and paralyze their prey. Against most species, it would have worked. The energy would have locked onto ship systems, frozen crews in place, made them easy targets for integration. But human ships had been designed by the Awakened, built with technologies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "Phase shift now," Jack ordered. Half the human fleet seemed to vanish, sliding sideways through dimensions the harvesters hadn't expected them to access. The energy tendrils passed through empty space, finding nothing to grasp. Then the human ships reappeared, but in different positions, already firing. The weapons humanity had developed were unlike anything in harvester memory. Instead of trying to pierce their crystalline armor with conventional forces, human weapons attacked the mathematical foundations of harvester existence. Probability bombs exploded in silent fury, creating zones where the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. Quantum torpedoes didn't destroy harvester ships so much as convince them they had never existed in the first place. But the harvesters adapted quickly. They had conquered species for millions of years after all. Their formations shifted, becoming more fluid, less predictable. Their weapons began modulating, trying to find frequencies that would affect the phase-shifted human vessels. "Second wave incoming," Lisa announced. 3 times as many ships." Jack smiled grimly. "Good. Begin Operation Wasp Nest." From the surface of the 3 Kepler colonies, millions of tiny objects launched. Each no bigger than a baseball, they looked harmless compared to the massive harvester vessels. The aliens ignored them at first, focusing on the capital ships that posed obvious threats. That was their mistake. The objects were hybrid technology, part human engineering and part awakened knowledge. They attached to harvester hulls like remora fish, then began doing what humans did best, being incredibly annoying. They didn't try to destroy the ships, just disrupted their systems in thousands of tiny ways. Navigation sensors gave slightly wrong readings. Communication arrays developed barely noticeable delays. Weapon targeting systems suffered from minor calibration errors. "It's working," Lisa said, a note of pride in her voice. "They're having to devote processing power to dealing with the wasps. Their reaction time is slowing." The battle raged for hours, then days. For every harvester ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. But something was different about this harvest. Usually, species fought desperately for a while, then broke when they realized the futility of resistance. Humans just kept fighting, adapting, trying new tactics with an enthusiasm that bordered on insanity. On the 3rd day, Jack implemented his masterstroke. "All awakened. Begin conversion protocol. Show them what happens when the harvest fails." Across the battlefield, awakened humans revealed their true nature. Lisa's form exploded into pure energy, diving directly into a harvester command ship. Other awakened did the same, using their understanding of harvester technology to turn it against itself. They couldn't destroy the ships from outside, but from within. They could rewrite the very codes that made them function. Jack watched as harvester ships began to turn on each other. Not many at first, just a few whose integration systems had been reversed, but the effect spread like a virus. The perfect unity of the harvest fleet began to fracture as ships found themselves fighting their own kind. "They're pulling back," someone reported in amazement. "The harvesters are actually retreating." But Jack didn't celebrate. He had studied their patterns, understood their psychology as much as any human could. No, they're regrouping. They've never encountered this kind of resistance before. They'll be back with their main fleet. Lisa rematerialized beside him, looking exhausted despite not truly needing rest. "We did it, Jack. We proved humans can fight them." "We proved we can surprise them," Jack corrected. "But surprises only work once. Next time they'll be ready for our tricks." The cost had been high. 3 colonies defended, but at the loss of nearly a third of the human fleet. More concerning was the toll on the awakened. Several had burned out entirely, pushing their transformed bodies beyond even their expanded limits. They had died as heroes, but they were resources humanity couldn't afford to lose. In the weeks that followed, Jack threw himself into preparation for the next battle. He studied every moment of the Kepler engagement, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that could give humanity an edge. What he found both encouraged and terrified him. The harvesters fought like a machine, because that's essentially what they were, a vast, collective intelligence that had grown by absorbing other species. They were brilliant but predictable, powerful but inflexible. Humans, in contrast, fought like a controlled forest fire, chaotic and destructive, but with an underlying purpose. "We need to be even more unpredictable," Jack told the War Council during a holographic meeting. "They'll expect us to use the same tactics. We need to do the opposite of what worked before." Admiral Sandra Martinez, Earth's senior military commander, looked skeptical. "You want us to abandon successful strategies?" "I want us to evolve," Jack replied. "The harvesters are like an immune system that's seen a virus. They'll have antibodies ready for our previous attacks, so we become a completely different virus." He outlined his plan. Instead of scattering when the harvesters arrived, the human fleet would form the tightest formation possible. Instead of using phase shift technology to avoid their weapons, they would let themselves be hit, but with ships designed to absorb and redirect the energy. Instead of the awakened infiltrating harvester vessels, they would create false awakened decoys that would waste harvester resources. "It's insane," Martinez said after a long pause, "which is exactly why it might work." As the human fleets prepared for the next engagement, Jack found himself spending more time with Lisa. She was changing, becoming something that transcended her original human form. Sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, he caught her, staring at her hands as if she didn't recognize them. "Are you afraid?" he asked her one evening as they watched Earth's sun set from the orbital command station. "Of dying? No," she replied. "Of losing what's left of my humanity? Every day." He took her hand, surprised to find it still felt warm and real. "You're more human than you think. A machine wouldn't worry about losing its humanity." She smiled, sadly. "Or maybe that's just what the human parts of me want to believe. Each time I interface with their technology, I understand it better, but I also become more like it. One day, there might be nothing left of Lisa Chun except memories in a quantum consciousness. Then we'd better win this war before that happens," Jack said firmly. The next harvester assault came at Jupiter's moons, a massive fleet that dwarfed their previous efforts. But humanity was ready with new surprises, new impossibilities. Ships that split into multiple versions of themselves, each one real until observed. Weapons that fired backwards through time, hitting targets before they were launched. Awakened, who had learned to exist in multiple places simultaneously, confusing harvester targeting systems. The battle was brutal, chaotic, and magnificent. Humanity lost ships by the hundreds, but the harvesters lost something more precious, their certainty. For the first time in millions of years, the Eternal Harvest faced a species that not only resisted integration, but seemed to thrive on the challenge dot as Jack coordinated the defense, moving fleets like pieces on a four-dimensional chessboard. He realized something profound. Humanity wasn't winning because they were stronger or smarter than the harvesters. They were winning because they were willing to sacrifice everything, to transform themselves into something new, to embrace chaos and destruction if it meant survival. The harvesters had made a fatal error. They had come to harvest humanity, to add them to their eternal collection. But humans weren't meant to be Calais. The harvester mothership appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a small moon made of living crystal. It was beautiful and terrible, a construct that had traveled between galaxies for eons, carrying within it the absorbed consciousness of 1,000,000 dead civilizations. Every human who saw it felt the same thing, a deep, primal understanding that this was their extinction-given form. Jack stood on the bridge of the Defiance, now bearing scars from a dozen battles, and watched as humanity's last hope assembled. Every ship that could fight had come home. Mining vessels fitted with improvised weapons, luxury cruisers turned into missile platforms, even ancient museum ships restored to battle readiness. If humanity was going to die, it would die fighting with everything it had. Lisa appeared beside him, and he barely recognized her anymore. Her form shifted constantly now, sometimes human, sometimes pure energy, sometimes something that hurt to look at directly. The cost of using harvester technology against them was becoming clear. Each awakened was burning through their humanity like fuel, becoming more alien with every battle. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. "I can see why they chose it as their primary form. It's perfectly efficient, perfectly logical." "Lisa," Jack said quietly, "stay with me. Remember who you are." She turned to him, and for a moment her eyes were the warm brown he remembered from their first mission together. "I'm trying, Jack, but it's hard." Their thoughts are so clear, so purposeful. No doubt, no fear, no messy human emotions. Just the eternal goal of preservation through collection. "That's not preservation," Jack said firmly. "That's death. A museum isn't alive just because it holds artifacts. Those civilizations they absorbed, they're gone. What remains is just an echo, a recording. Humans aren't meant to be recordings." The mothership began its approach, moving with the slow confidence of a predator that had never known defeat. Smaller vessels emerged from its crystalline surface, each one larger than any human battleship. They spread out in perfect formation, ready to begin the final harvest of Earth. "All ships, all stations," Jack broadcast across the system. "This is Captain Morrison. I won't lie to you. We've never faced anything like this. They've destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced than ours. By any logical measure, we should have no chance." He paused, looking at the tactical displays, showing the overwhelming enemy forces. "But humans have never been logical. We're the species that looked at the ocean and built boats. We looked at the sky and built wings. We looked at space itself and decided it wasn't big enough to hold us. Today, we look at our own extinction and say, not yet." The human fleet moved into position, not in any formation the harvesters would recognize, but in something uniquely human, organized chaos. Ships paired and grouped based on their crew's personal preferences, old rivalries forgotten in the face of annihilation. Earth's orbital defenses powered up, weapons that could crack continents aimed outward at the stars. The first exchange of fire lit up the solar system. Harvester weapons that had shattered 1,000 worlds met human shields that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Human missiles that carried the hopes and dreams of 10 billion people sought weak points in crystalline armor that had never known weakness. For hours the battle raged, neither side gaining clear advantage. Then the mothership did something unprecedented in its million-year history. It spoke. The message came through every communication channel simultaneously, rendered in perfect human languages. You fight well for primitives. Your chaos is ... instructive. Surrender now, and your integration will be painless. Continue resistance and watch your world burn before collection. Jack looked at Lisa, then at his bridge crew, then at the tactical displays showing humanity's battered but unbroken forces. His response was broadcast just as widely. Humanity has a saying, it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. But here's the thing about humans, we're really bad at dying. So how about option 3? We live on our feet and you leave us the hell alone. The mothership's response was immediate and violent. Weapons that humanity had never seen before lashed out, reality-warping beams that turned matter into probability clouds. 3 defense platforms simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered across dimensions. 100 human ships vanished in the first minute, but humanity had one last card to play, and her name was Lisa Chun. It's time, she said, her form finally stabilizing into something that was both human and transcendent. I understand now, Jack. The Harvester's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They're a collective, a single mind spread across countless forms. But what happens to a mind when it's given something it can't digest? Before Jack could stop her, Lisa launched herself from the Defiance, her body becoming pure energy as she streaked toward the mothership. Other awakened followed, dozens of them, each burning through the last of their humanity in a final desperate gambit. They struck the mothership simultaneously, not trying to destroy it, but to merge with it. Lisa's consciousness, shaped by human chaos and alien order, dove deep into the collective mind of the Harvesters. What she found there staggered her. Millions of absorbed civilizations, each one perfectly preserved but utterly static, frozen at the moment of their collection. This is what you offer, she broadcast through the mothership's own systems, her voice reaching every Harvester unit simultaneously. Not survival, but taxidermy. Not growth, but stagnation. You've spent so long collecting that you've forgotten what it means to truly live. She began to show them, flooding the collective consciousness with human memories, human emotions, human contradictions. The pain of loss and the joy of discovery. The fear of death and the courage to face it anyway. The chaos of free while colliding with the order of shared purpose. Love and hate, hope and despair, all the messy, illogical, beautiful things that made humanity what it was. The mothership shuddered, its perfect crystalline structure developing cracks. For the first time in its existence, the collective consciousness experienced doubt. The absorbed civilizations, dormant for millennia, began to stir as Lisa's human chaos awakened something within them. No, the collective voice boomed across. Space, order must be maintained. The harvest must continue. Chaos leads only to extinction. Does it? Lisa asked, and now her voice was joined by others, echoes of civilizations long thought dead. Or does your order lead to extinction? How many unique thoughts have you silenced? How many possible futures have you prevented? You say you preserve, but all you do is prevent change. And without change, there is no life. A battle in space paused as both fleets watched the mothership writhe. Its surface rippled like water, forms emerging and dissolving as the collective consciousness warred with itself. Some parts tried to expel the awakened, while others embraced them, curious about these new thoughts. After eons of saneness, Jack saw the opportunity and took it. All ships, concentrate fire on Sector 7. Lisa's given us an opening. The human fleet struck with everything they had, pouring fire into the gaps Lisa and the Awakened had created in the mothership's defenses. But it wasn't the weapons that delivered the killing blow. It was the idea Lisa had planted, spreading through the collective, like a virus of consciousness. What if there was another way? The mothership began to transform, its rigid structure becoming fluid, chaotic, alive in a way it hadn't been for millions of years. The absorbed civilizations were waking up, not as they had been, but as something new, shaped by human chaos and their own ancient wisdom. "Jack," Lisa's voice came through the communications, weak but triumphant. "It's working. They're changing. Not destroyed, but transformed. The harvest is becoming something else, something that grows instead of just collecting. The smaller harvester." Ships began to change too, their formations breaking apart as individual units began to think for themselves for the first time. Some fled, unable to handle the new sensations. Others moved closer to human ships, curious about these creatures that had broken the eternal pattern. The mothership's transformation reached a crescendo, its crystalline form shattering and reforming into something that had no name in any language. It pulsed with new life, chaotic and beautiful, a fusion of a million civilizations' dreams, finally allowed to grow beyond their preserved forms. When it spoke again, the voice was different, uncertain, but filled with wonder. What have you done to us?" "We've given you a choice," Jack responded. "The same choice every human faces every day. You can continue as you were, collecting and preserving until the universe dies of boredom. Or you can choose to grow, to change, to live. It's messier, sure, but it's also magnificent." The entity that had been the mothership was silent for a moment. "Then, we need time. Time to understand what we've become. Time to explore these new possibilities. Will you grant us this?" Jack looked at his crew, at the battered human fleet, at Earth shining blue and perfect in the darkness. "Time is something humans never have enough of. But yeah, we can share some with you. On one condition, no more harvesting. If you want to interact with other species, you ask, you trade, you learn, but you never take without permission again." "Agreed," the entity said, and somehow Jack knew it would honor that promise. The chaos Lisa had introduced wouldn't all.